Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the evening of the first ever Global Donut Day. We began at 7:30 UK time this morning in Melbourne, Australia, and it just keeps on rolling, and there's still many hours to go. So it's just fantastic to see so many people joining now from all over the world. And it's wonderful to see all these places popping up in the chat box. Keep it going. So I am Kate Raworth, and I've been asked to give a 20-minute overview of the 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist. And when people used to ask me to do that, I'd say, well, that's impossible. I can't do that in 20 minutes. That's crazy. But, you know, there's nothing like a good challenge and some boundaries. Boundaries unleash creativity, right? So I decided to take on the challenge, and I'm going to give you a 20-minute whirlwind tour of the 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist. And the first thing to say is I'm not going to use any slides. Why would you do that? I'm going to draw on the most fundamental tool that we have. And by the way, it's not one of these. It is not a calculator. We are not here to start with maths and equations and numbers. They come later. They are not fundamental. What's fundamental is the way we see the world, whether it's literally through our eyes or figuratively in the concepts that we speak to. Because how we see the world will literally shape what we can see and what we can't see, what we put at the center of our vision, what we leave at the periphery, or what we leave off screen altogether. The models we make and the relationships that we show between things are fundamental, and we need to start there. So I am going to show you 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist in images only, in pictures and objects here on the screen. So the first way to think like a 21st century economist is to change the goal of what we think the economy is for. I mean, if we don't have a good goal, how would we ever know what success looks like? And the 20th century goal is best represented with a piece of hosepipe, and it was endless growth. The idea that the success of economy is when GDP or national income goes up and up and up, endlessly increasing every year on year on year on year. Indeed, even in the richest economies in the world, including where I'm sitting here in the UK, and all high-income nations, if you listen to the speeches of politicians and to the advice of economists, the story goes that the only solution to our problems and the challenges we face lies in yet more growth, even though we are among the richest countries in the history of humanity. So there's something insane and impossible about this goal. It's time to move beyond it, because we know it has also wrought huge inequalities and huge environmental degradation in that pursuit. So goodbye to the goal of endless growth. Let's replace it with something wiser. And for this, I offer you a compass, and it is shaped like a donut. So the goal here is to leave no one in the hole in the middle, falling short on the essentials of life, but don't overshoot the limits of Earth's life supporting systems. It's that easy. And the goal of the donut is a very different shape from endless growth. It's about thriving in balance. And that just looks like a heartbeat. We know in our own bodies that our health lies in balance. Can we take what we deeply know in our bodies, from the human body to the planetary body? And let's recognize that this idea of health lying in balance, thriving within limits, lies in the roots of many indigenous cultures. It is a deeply known wisdom that Western economic thinking is only just beginning to find its way back towards. So let's change the goal. And here we have a donut. Leave no one in the hole, falling short on these essentials of life, without food or water, without healthcare and education. Leave no one without housing, access to transport and networks and community and voice and income. These 12 social dimensions, I crowdsourced them from the world's governments, which means that every government in the world has already agreed that everyone in the world has a right not to live in this hole. But as we collectively seek to meet our needs and wants, we risk overshooting these 9 planetary boundaries, the life-supporting systems of our planetary home. Because life on this planet depends upon a stable climate and fertile soils and abundant biodiversity and recharging fresh water and a protective ozone layer overhead. So we'd be crazy to kick ourselves out of this balance. But that is, of course, exactly what we are doing. So if we're going to come back within planetary boundaries and finally meet the needs of all people for the first time, how should we think about our economies? If you were going to teach a class in economics, what would be the biggest picture of the economy that you would show to students? And this is the second way to think like a 21st century economist. See the big picture. You see, 20th century economics taught a big picture of the economy that was focused on tracing money loops going round and round. And it's called, it's called the circular flow of goods and money. So you see money going round and round and resources going round and round. This came from Paul Samuelson in the 1940s. It can still be found in textbooks today. Quite handy for managing a war economy if that's what you're doing, but disastrous for many other reasons, because it is essentially like a piece of perpetual plumbing, pipes that just go round and round in a circle. This plumbing can't work. Nothing will flow in here. Why? Because there's no source of energy. We have to put energy at the heart of 21st century economics. Energy that comes from the sun and that comes from life. And consider the economy as not a closed perpetual motion machine. It's an open system, a subsystem of the living world. So let's start the big picture again with a diagram that I call the embedded economy diagram. So here we've got the economy is a subsystem of society. It's a human social construct, which means we can reconstruct it too. And it's embedded in social institutions like legal, political, and cultural institutions. And human society is embedded in the rest of the living world. We are part of nature and utterly dependent upon the web of life. And life is thanks to this river of solar energy in which we are bathed every day. This is the second law of thermodynamics. Welcome to entropy. It's one of the fundamental laws that everything else has to align with in life on this planet. We draw in matter and materials from Earth's generosity. We put out waste and pollution. And so the 101 rule of the economy must be that this economy must function with and within the cycles of the living world so that we don't disrupt them. That's what they call ecological economics, but it really should just be economic common sense for everyone. But also look inside the economy, right? Yes, we have the market and the state. And this is where 20th century economics got totally obsessed with an ideological boxing match. Are you a free market, laissez-faire capitalist or a state-loving socialist? And in the boxing match between these two, economists lost sight of 2 other fundamental ways in which we provision daily for our needs and wants. There's the household, where we begin every day with family, as parents, as carers, as children, as partners, caring for one another, doing the cooking, the washing, the cleaning, the sweeping, raising the kids, getting labor fresh and ready for work in the market and the state. So these are utterly dependent upon the unpaid caring work in the household. We cannot ignore it. But also the commons, where people come together not through the market mechanism of price, not through the state of public goods, but as a community, co-producing goods and services that they value, often with no money changing hands. Think of Wikipedia on the World Wide Web. Think of a neighborhood garden on the corner of your block. Think of a club you might belong to. The commons is what brings us together in collaboration. We need all 4 of these forms of organizing, and they each have unique qualities and they each have their limits. But we need economies that make space for them all. And I think from the 20th century, we've inherited economies in which the market has crowded out the household and rolled back the state and occupied the commons. And we need a rebalancing. And then here in the middle, financial flows. Imagine if finance was a service, actually in service to this economy, in service to human flourishing in the living world. Reimagining finance in service to life. Now that is a big picture worth pursuing. So we need a new big picture of the economy. What about us, who we are, humanity within the economy? Well, going back to Adam Smith and John Stuart Mill, all the way through to Milton Friedman, economists created a portrait and a caricature of humanity that they put at the heart of their models, expressed in equations. But I think it's important to make the character they called rational economic man, let's make him visible. He would have to look something like this. He would be a man with no dependents. He's standing alone, independent of judgment. He's got money in his hand. That's how he interacts with the world. He's got ego in his heart. He's got a calculator in his head, and he has nature at his feet. He hates work. He loves luxury, and he knows the price of everything. Now, the real problem with this character is not just how absurdly narrow that is. The real problem and the danger of him is what looking at him does to us. Because research has found that the more that students study this character of rational economic man, the more they say they value self-interest over altruism, the more they value competition over collaboration. So who we tell ourselves we are shapes who we become. We start to mirror the models we make of ourselves. And if we're going to thrive as 8 billion people here on this planet together, we need a far, far richer portrait of humanity. So where could we find that portrait? Let's just look at ourselves here in this conversation. We are the most social of all mammals. We're more social than the naked mole rat, which is a great collaborator, but only with its next of kin. We humans collaborate with those beyond our family groups. We share, we cooperate, we cue, we empathize. We have phenomenal pro-social capabilities, and we have to nurture the best of human nature and put that at the heart of our economic designs so that we fulfill our pro-social potential. So that was the third way to think like a 21st century economist. What about the fourth way? It's about thinking, how does the economy actually work? 20th century economic models got very caught in mechanistic thinking. Economists wanted to make their subject like physics, and so used mechanical or physics-like metaphors, the laws of economics, the laws of diminishing returns. These are not laws. But in the pursuit of laws, they got very physics-oriented. And so it's almost as if a policy would come in with a mechanical intervention, and you could wrench the system and change it with control and know what was going to happen. Don't be so naive. We cannot control our economies like this. An economy is more like a complex adaptive system. It's got feedback loops in it. It's got unpredictable behavior that you don't know exactly what's going to happen next. You can't control this, but we can seek to understand it, to understand its feedback loops and dynamics. And so by doing that, we can seek to be good stewards of it and ensure that it pursues the goals that we value. And if we are going to be stewards, less mechanic, more like gardener, what kind of dynamics would we want to bring about in our economies? And so the fifth way to think like a 21st century economist recognizes that we have inherited economies that are deeply divisive by design of regulation, by inheritance, by privilege, by infrastructure, by law. They tend to capture value and opportunity in the hands of a few. Did you know that over the last decade, the number of billionaires has more than doubled in the world, from 1,000 billionaires to 2,000 billionaires? And the richest 1% of people in the world own half of the world's wealth. There is absolutely no way that humanity can get into the donut in such an extraordinarily unequal world. We need to transform this deeply divisive economy into one that is far more distributive by design, so that we share the value and opportunity that's created with everybody who co-creates it. And that turns out to be the whole of society. We can create economies that are so much more distributive by design, because inequality is not an economic law. It is a design choice, and we can choose otherwise. At the same time as moving from divisive to distributive economies, the sixth way to think like a 21st century economist recognizes we've inherited deeply degenerative economies, like our pipe of production. We take Earth's materials, we stick them in the pipe of production, we make them into stuff we want, we use it for a while, often only once, and then we throw it away. And this linear degenerative system of take, make, use, lose, that's pushing us over planetary boundaries. We need to bend this arrow around into a circular, a cyclical, a regenerative economy where resources aren't used up, they're used again and again, more carefully, more collectively, more creatively, more slowly. And again, indigenous cultures would say, but this is the way we have always lived, within our means, with the materials of the earth, returning them to the earth. How can we overcome the loss of that connection through chemical industrialization? How can we return to the materials of the living world? So if we're going to create dynamics that are not divisive but distributive, not degenerative but regenerative, then this brings us to the seventh way to think like a 21st century economist. We have to come back to where we began, back to that story of growth. You see, because the 20th century economists left us in something like an aeroplane of growth. They gave a metaphor that the growth of an economy is like an airplane that takes off. You get liftoff, and then you come to just fly off into the horizon of consumerism. Well, they left the 20th century economic plane flying in midair. But this plane now needs to land. We need to learn how to take the growth centricity out of our economies. So instead of being endlessly addicted to growth, let's start by recognizing that growth is a wonderful, healthy phase of life. It's why we love to see our kids grow. It's why we love to see plants and nature grow. But nothing in nature grows forever. Anything that thrives and survives, it grows up. Anything that tries to grow forever will kill itself or the system on which it depends. And in our own bodies, we call that cancer. So we need to follow nature's growth curve, which with a small flick of the wrist is like this. Things in nature grow and then they grow up and they mature. How could we create economies that do this? The key to it is to take out the growth dependency that's been written into our economies over the last 100 years, especially fueled by fossil fuels, which made growth seem natural, inevitable, unavoidable, always coming. We have created political, financial, and social lock-ins to endless growth. And it's time to look them in the eye and imagine and create policies that take away that growth dependency. Easier said than done. I think this is the existential 21st century economic question of how do we end our addiction to endless growth? So those are the 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist. And as I wrote in Doughnut Economics, there are, of course, many more ways. In fact, we held a competition some years ago. What do you think would be the 8th way to think like a 21st century economist? And I think the answer to that has actually revealed itself. I think the 8th way is to try to put these ideas into practice. It's exactly what the community working with Doughnut Economics Action Lab has been doing, because I profoundly believe that 21st century economics is going to be practiced first and theorized later. And so it's by hanging out with the practitioners, by being the practitioners, that we learn which of these ideas has traction, which takes off fast, which meets the most resistance, and how can we actually get these ideas to become the new economy. So With that, I want to hand this over to everybody on this call to take this into a conversation in breakout rooms, to meet a few other people in that room, introduce yourselves, and just share for the next 15 minutes. What have you been learning about putting these ideas into practice where you are? Welcome back. So we have two things you can do. One, we would love it if anybody wants to write a really succinct message in the chat box of a reflection that you were sharing with the group, or something you heard somebody saying in there about the challenges or the reality of trying to put these ideas into practice. We won't be able to run through all of them, but we can pick out some messages that you leave there, but we will keep and harvest everything that comes out of these chat boxes. So we'd love to hear what you've been learning about trying to put these ideas into practice in your own locality. And if you want to bring a question, pose me a question, you can use the Q&A box. So please go ahead. Reflections very welcome. Questions very welcome. Oh, I can see people popping up with hands. Come on, then let's just use. Should we just use the hands method? Hi, Monica. Do you want to? You have a question?
Sorry, I'm like hyperventilating right now because I'm like, you are like my hero right now, and I'm like, Monica. So I'm gonna cry because you are such a beautiful woman, and I thank you so much for being here in this moment in time and sharing your knowledge and sharing your strength. And I'm so happy to be in this room with everybody. I'm so happy that we're here. Okay, I'm a little girl right now. Okay, let's get focused. So one thing that I wanted to share from our group was volunteer hours. All the things that we're doing to do all the work and everything, we need volunteer hours and the monetary backing for it, because I know my activism is at 20, like I dream volunteerism. I dream like, what can I do? What can I do? What's the next thing? And it's like, you're always on, you're always working. And so getting some sort of stipend or just payment or anything that can be recognized volunteer work is something that I pulled from our group, our breakout. And I was like, that makes sense. Like there's not enough time in the day, and it is, we have the energy that we put it where we put it is like very, very core to our mission. And so I just feel like we need to be, I don't know, with food too, with compensated with food or something, because we need to be together. So thank you. I know I'll have more questions, but right now I'm just so happy to be here.
Thanks, Monica. And I just want to say that you started by thanking me, but then you just spoke to what I think is really going on, which is the incredible work of many, right? The volunteer hours that are going into this work by so many people. Imagine how overwhelmed and blown away I am by that, and the community that this has become. But thank you for raising that point. I think it's very, very true. I know a bunch of people who are on this call who, whether they're paid or not to do this work, put in huge hours. And because, of course, if we're trying to transform the system that doesn't particularly want to be transformed, it's often coming out of people's caring time, their community time. And it's the importance of that household and the commons that people are putting in time from that space. And I think absolutely, if we can create mechanisms and ways of recognizing that time, of valuing that time and supporting people so that it doesn't all have to be through volunteer time, because otherwise we risk getting burned out. And that's why we need the big community. We need to recognize that time. At Doughnut Economics Action Lab, we are investigating if and how we can set up some kind of funding mechanism that will exactly support many small groups. It's in the early stages of designing that, so there's no insight to share back from it, but I'm really glad you brought that point, and thank you so much for being part of this community.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Raquel.
Hi, Kate. Thank you very much again for these lessons. Always amazing. I would like to share with the group that I just finished my master's degree at Schumacher College in design thinking. And I had the opportunity to practice the Doughnut tool for business in an internship, and it was just amazing, easy to understand, easy to practice, and everyone loved it. So I invite everyone to get a look and practice. This is just amazing too. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful to hear, Raquel. So I'm just going to tell the world, Rob, who is here in this call, was also a student at Schumacher College, and Carlotta, co-founder of Deal, also at Schumacher College. So Schumacher has a big role in the foundations of Deal, and of course, strong resonance with the ideas taught. It's great to hear that you really like the Doughnut Design for Business tool. And in case others don't know, many companies have approached us in Doughnut Economics Action Lab, said, oh yeah, we want to put the donut into practice in our business. And so we're very cautious in this area, because you can imagine it could quickly get greenwashed. And we say, if you want to do the donut for business, you need to talk about these 5 things. What is your purpose as a company, your networks of relationship, how you're governed, how you're owned, and how you're financed. And that is now in a tool that anybody can find. It's in the commons on our platform, Doughnut Design for Business. I'm really glad to hear that you found it useful. We've been running workshops with cooperatives and major companies, newly started up companies, and ones that have been going for 300 years. And our colleague Erinch is really pushing the boundaries of conversation with companies about recognizing that they're going to need to redesign business itself, so that it's no longer driven by this character, right? This character has been sort of CEO and boss and occupying the space of business. Business does not have to be done like this. We can bring our whole selves into the world of business, and we need to make it a vehicle for transformation. So that's fantastic to hear that you really valued it.
To add that I ran in a startup, cosmetic vegan startup based in Lisbon, and it was amazing because they could see that they had the structure, and they were born with the ideas, but in running the business, they were like, oh, we need the next round of investment, and they were losing their essence. But I think I put a seed there.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much.
So Kate, we've had a few questions come through in the Q&A.
Cool.
So Kirsty J asks, are we deluding ourselves that there's time for any of these smaller scale solutions, the wonderful smaller scale solutions, or do we need to push at a different level? So your reflections on the working at the different levels, whether it's all the way to the UN or it's all at the grassroots level.
Is there time? Is there time? We could, of course, ask that the other way around and say, I mean, I really appreciate that question. People started trying to work on the top level solutions with governments in 1992 on climate change, Convention on Climate Change, right? And the country's committed to that. We're what, 28 years later? Still global carbon emissions are increasing. So to imagine that working with the most powerful actors at the top level will be the one that'll filter down, it's not happening. In fact, I'm more and more often realizing that one of the reasons why Doughnut Economics has gained traction with official organizations at the city level, I'm talking about local governments, right? Over 70 local governments around the world are now engaging with the tools and the concepts of Doughnut Economics. Why is it happening much more at the local level than at the national level? And I think part of the reason is because cities may be in competition for investment and to be a sort of hub of regeneration or business, but nations are caught in a geopolitics that really traps them in many ways in the growth-centric mindset. When I talk about lock-ins to political lock-ins to growth, one of them is what I call the G20 family photo. No government wants to be kicked out of the G20 family photo, but if a country unilaterally says we're going to stop pursuing growth, we're going to thrive instead, they might fear that they will literally be booted out of the G20 because it's a positioning of power, and power comes from economic size. So there is a massive geopolitical lock-in to pursuing growth at the national scale. It's crucial to have the negotiations to try to transform at the UN level, at the national levels. But as one of the principles that Carlotta shared in the last session, at Deal, we recognize we are just one actor in a very big ecosystem. No one can try and change everything. Deal strategy wouldn't work if it was the only strategy. But our strategy as part of a bigger ecosystem is to go where the energy is, to go where things are already starting to happen. Run with those who are already moving, because that mobilizes. And what we're seeing is in April 2020, Amsterdam launched its city portrait. This had immediate, tangible ripple effects. Copenhagen, 6 weeks later, said, we're going to do the same thing. Then Brussels, then Barcelona, then Glasgow, in Europe, and then beyond. So these ripples have been very visible and very real. And now the European Commission, you can imagine, they're looking, saying, what's going on? Some of the biggest, most powerful cities, the best well-known cities in Europe are doing what? What is this doughnut economics? And so it's generating interest at the level of government above. So this also can be a way of making change happen. I'm going to end though with, I think, Kirsty's existential question. Do we have time? I mean, if only any of us knew where is the leverage point, like, you know, if only we could figure out where in this system, but we don't know. The system is much more like this. And so we all work with the place that we can touch, the place where we feel the momentum and the dynamism, and see what happens when these connect. We certainly are late. The world is late. And yet we show up and do what we most believe we can make change happen. And I sense, and I think many of those who are drawn to this kind of work sense, go with the energy, because this is where things are moving. And you never know what bigger changes it could kick off.
And that speaks beautifully to a couple of other questions on how we bring this to politicians. But I'll move it in a different direction and raise the question from Anna Maria, who asks about the role of spirituality in the donut, and how could this be seen as a fourth pillar of sustainability?
Oh, the way Anna Maria asked that question makes me want to ask it right back to her, because when somebody asks a question like that, you can like, oh, there's somebody there's got a very clear answer. So I can give a very personal answer to this. I was trained in a very Western economic mindset, and I was personally raised in a house without any religious tradition. So I was raised without thinking about spirituality. It wasn't part of my vocabulary. And in fact, it was when I first gave a talk on Doughnut Economics, when I was writing the book at Schumacher College, and I finished the talk and somebody said, yeah, but where's the spirituality? Is it like, how could you miss this out? And it was a real question to me. Oh, that's not something that I think. I'm an economist. Why would people think I would bring that? And I'm on my own journey of thinking, what does that mean as a white English middle-class woman living in the UK now? What do I bring as a spirituality? Because I don't think there is a spirituality that anyone can say that's the one that goes with Doughnut Economics. It will be adapted to the cultural context, to the philosophical or religious belief or the spiritual belief of any one person. So we each need to find our own spirituality. I'll say one more thing on this. I showed at the beginning of the presentation those indigenous symbols from all over the world. And sitting in the UK, it's easy to think that indigenous culture and thinking is somewhere over there, far away. But actually one of those symbols I showed was the Celtic double spiral. And I'm speaking more and more with people in this country who remind me that an indigenous culture and spirituality is not just out there, it's also under here. It's under the Industrial Revolution. It's under the structures and the worldview of neoliberal economics and capitalist economics. It's under us, back in traditions that our forebears lived by. People made corn dollies. They reaped the harvest and they stored the spirit of the harvest in their homes until they put it back in the soil. So they recognized, in villages across the country, they recognized the connection with the soil and water spirits. So I'm really interested, as an English woman, that is my cultural inheritance. I want to find that English eco-spirituality that lies underneath, and then so fascinated and curious to understand what makes sense to others in their cultural contexts. And I think again and again, we find what the spirituality tells us is we are part of the living world. Our breath literally roots us to the air. And everything is a web of life. And our ancestors knew this and lived in cycles. And we need to learn from what lies under, what lies beyond, and find our own way back to those cycles of life of which we are inevitably a part. That's my expression for me and on my own fascinating journey of the spirituality. But I invite Anna Maria and others, if you have a clear conviction of what the spirituality means to you, please bring it, share it on Deal's platform and inspire others to find their own route to it too.
And I think that's a wonderful note to end. And that invitation, that Doughnut Economics is yours to make your own, and to, as Imi Kaur in Birmingham, who I can see is on this call, says, you know, hack it, make it yours, you know, keep the rings of the donut, but, you know, just find what's right for your culture, your context, your nature and your needs. You know, there's adaptability in every corner of Doughnut Economics. And I'd say I'm sorry to all the people we've not been able to get to answer the questions. And to John, you've had your hand up, but we're going to have to draw the session to a close there. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you so much, Kate, for bringing the props.
Thank
today.
you. And perhaps if everybody just wants to unmute and we can all just say hello and goodbye. And thank you so much for joining today, because we can see all these little faces. So
Thank you so
thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Hi,
Kate.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Million.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Love.
Bye.